Welcome to the Bill Walton Show, featuring conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and thinkers. Fresh perspectives on money, culture, politics, and human flourishing. Interesting people, interesting things.
Welcome back. I'm here with Don Boudreaux and John Tamny, and we're talking about the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown and what the consequences of that are versus the possible benefits that we've been promised. So let's pick it up again. John, you were talking about the disproportionate impact on the poorest people in society. There's this divide between those people in the elite class who've got great jobs. You can do it from home. You've got a computer. You can do Zooming and things like that. But if you're a deliveryman or you're another sort of job where you can't do it from home, you're gone. You're out of work. All the retail workers, nobody, even before this meltdown, half the country only had like about, $500 in savings, maybe not even that.
Yeah.
So, and the program's going to run out soon. So where's this going?
Their work doesn't matter, don't you know? That because they can't, everyone can work from home, I thought. And so since everyone can do that, that's what politicians know. That's what the experts making these decisions, that's all they realistically know. And so people were pushed out of work in really sickening ways. Suddenly, you hear stories about an oyster company in Rappahannock, where you're, the area, it's called Rappahannock Oyster, and they had to lay off 350
Yeah, Rappahannock
workers.
Oyster Company, yeah.
Lay off 350 workers. Suddenly they had nothing. And so you think about the tragedy of this. It's not discussed. And then let's talk about even the people that can continue working. So many people in this elite middle say, well, we stay at home. So you subhumans who deliver my groceries and who deliver my Uber Eats when I'm tired of cooking, just knock on the door. Do not touch the door. Actually, just drop it and walk away. We can't have any physical contact. And so people were seriously worried about people dying and everything, stay at home and everything. But the subhumans that make it possible for us to stay at home, the cable technicians, the grocery delivery people, the Uber Eats people, you can continue working because, realistically, you probably don't believe in science to begin with, so you probably don't take this seriously. It's amazing. The arrogance, the decadent arrogance of all of this is stunning.
On top of that.
I can't. That's pretty good. I agree. It's arrogant. It's stunning. It's horrible. I think another factor in play here is people have in mind, politicians and ordinary people, they have in mind these past means of dealing with economic downturns. What are those past means? Oh, you have government print checks. You have the Federal Reserve throw out more money. And whatever the merits of those policies in the past, they don't work now because what's happening is the government has shut down production, and printing more money, writing more checks does not cause more toilet paper to be produced. It does not cause more pigs to be slaughtered. It does not cause more production. But I think people still, if they hear, I think they do become maybe a little bit less resistant to being shut down because they're, oh, well, government's going to cut me a check. That's fine. And so I'll be okay, or government will take care of me. I'll be okay, and they won't be okay. Production does not come from smearing ink on paper, and we will see that, I think, in a big way. I think that the risks of inflation is higher now than it has been, certainly significant inflation, higher now than it has been since the early 1980s.
Explain something to me. John, you've written about the Federal Reserve. Why don't we have inflation? We've just shoved $5 trillion out the door, and yet it's gone into the economy, and yet prices don't seem to be going up. How long does this? How long can we continue in this?
You can make inflation whatever you want to make it. It's all in which products you put into the mix. If they measured inflation the way they did in the 1970s, we would have seen inflation throughout the George W. Bush and Obama administration. So you can change that all the time to get a different outcome. But I'd like to continue on what Don's saying, and let's think about us right here. Bill, you couldn't have done as well as you did as an investment banker unless you loved it uncontrollably. I can't not do what I do. If you took away my work, I would lose it. And I know I speak for the both of us.
Yeah.
The arrogance of this, we're going to lock you down and put you out of work, and our reward to you is we're going to throw $1,200 at you? Have you lost your minds? If they did that to me, the only thing that kept me sane throughout this is I was able to continue to do my job. Imagine the people. Implicit here is that the 30 million plus out of work, that they didn't care about. It was all for the money. Can any of us say here that we did what we did throughout our lives for money? There's no way you could have put in those kind of hours for money. It was so much more than that.
Well, my observation, and I welcome your pushback, though, is that the left doesn't really value work. And that it's something, the dignity of work, the non-economic value of work, I mean, it's been so reduced to materialistic transaction where all the, quote, workers are suffering under these big bosses, and people wouldn't do anything unless they were made to by people, and they're underpaid, and the work you're doing is not that valuable, on and on and on. Mm-hmm. I think that's playing itself out in the lockdown now with what's, I mean, essential work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Essential work. Think about that.
Arrogance.
I mean, as an economist, you explain how nothing is not essential.
Yeah, this is a big topic, but one of the beautiful things about the economy.
We do big topics.
Yeah,
here.
that's great. One of the beautiful things about the economy we have, right, is that we all contribute our little small inputs
Right.
into the larger output, right? And some of these things are more visible, right? You see the factory worker. You don't see the investment banker behind the factory making that factory worker's job possible. But everybody contributes. You take out one piece of those in any significant amount, and the economy suffers. You take out more pieces, the economy suffers more. It's simply a mistake to think that there's a handful of really productive tasks, and the rest of the tasks are sort of, subsidiary. It's like, water boys at a football game. It's not like that at all.
Well, that's what I meant about not valuing all work.
Yeah,
I mean,
It
seems like the fundamental political divide is: do you value work? Do you value people who work, or don't you?
Yeah.
Well, as you allude, Bill, to some in the political realm, they just assume, people are just working because they have to.
Yeah.
And they're treated horribly while they're doing what they have to do. Yet there's the people get pride from it. I don't want to not work. It's something that gives me happiness. And so the idea that 30 million people just thought, no big deal, you gave me a check. $1,200 is, Warren Buffett could offer me $10 million, and I'm not sure I could stop doing what I do. This gives me too much joy. And so when government says it's not worth it, we're going to shut you down and we'll pay you for that. The stunning arrogance of that, again, I don't, it's not just that it hurt poor people, it's that they took away from people what gives their lives meaning.
And the social and the psychological, emotional impact of this is untold. This is the unseen thing where Jim Agresti was on a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the costs of this, and he estimates that in terms of millions of human years lost, we're going to lose 10 times, 100 times more human years lost because of the shutdown than had we not.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt
A big chunk of that is psychological damage. So depression, alcoholism, suicide. I mean, even if it's not outright suicide, the number of other maladies associated with being depressed is enormous.
Yeah.
You're more likely to get cancer. You're more likely to have a heart attack. These numbers are all going to start coming out.
And there's this other derivative problem from that, to use the term derivative now in a different
You're my friend. We can
way.
do economics. We can do economics.
I like that.
I like
and
that.
so the shutdown itself is going to cause it's causing many problems now. It's going to cause a whole train of problems into the future. And unfortunately, because this is the way the world works, many of those problems are going to be blamed on markets. Whereas in fact they're caused by government. And who will we call on to solve the problem? The government. Mm-hmm. People say, we have these poor people over here, they're sick, these poor people over here, they don't have enough experience, they don't have enough life savings. Let's call on the government. If only the market had been better. If only we had used more of the government in the past. And so I worry that there's, unfortunately, I think it's almost inevitable. I worry that the growth of the size and power of the state because of the shutdown has been ramped up, which will only make our futures worse.
I share that view, John.
Well, two things.
Of course, you've also written a wonderful piece just a couple months ago before this all started called Your Pessimism is Ridiculously Inaccurate, which I
Yes.
thought was great, because you point about all the wealth that you guys have both written about this, about how the market does end up providing.
It's a race between the market and the state. And fortunately, markets are incredibly robust, and they keep on keeping on. But at some point, they can't.
Yeah, but let's never forget, people have been predicting the end of the United States before it was the United States. Warren Buffett got rich buying from pessimists, and let's keep in mind with this, that this is nothing to entrepreneurs.
You mean what he calls cigar butt investing?
They go through this all the time. Phil Knight spent how many years thinking the next day was going to be Nike's last? And so what's got to be remembered is politicians have been blundering in stupendous fashion forever. Usually it was them getting us into ridiculous wars where the best and brightest, our youngest generation, was exterminated by some idiotic confrontation they got us into. In this case, and it's not to minimize the lives lost, we didn't lose our best and brightest. Politicians blundered yet again, but young people are still there. People have pulled back with their spending, which means capital formation is going to go up. My prediction going back to April was that the economic snapback from this admitted tragedy is going to be very grand.
And let's turn bullish. How's that?
Okay.
Because the
John's
market's
already bullish.
yeah, he's already, and I think I can get there pretty. What did you say? Phil Nike was worried about.
Phil Knight spent 18 years telling his wife, I think the company's going to make it, but as he said, that was a lie. I kept thinking the company was going to die. Entrepreneurs, and you know this well, I've always asked entrepreneurs back in 2009 when things were really bad, I said, well, what's going to happen? He says, this guy I knew in Houston said, are you kidding me? I'm way too smart for Obama, and I was way too smart for Bush too. This is nothing to me.
Well, my favorite book title is Andy Grove's book. You know, he was the famous CEO of Intel. Only the paranoid survive.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And it's true. If you're a CEO, you've got to operate as if things are not going to, you're going to get bad news every day, not good news. But the bullish case is this. The much maligned private equity industry has got a couple $1 trillion of capital. Venture capitals, I don't know what the numbers are, equal amounts of trillions of dollars. There's lots of brains and ideas. And as there's dislocation from certain industries, like, for example, if you're in the commercial real estate business in Manhattan, I think you ought to be thinking about another line of work, because that's going to get hurt pretty badly. But other things are going to come out. We've got supply chain issues. There are going to be people stepping up to fix that. Education, K-12, I'm optimistic that we could take some of what we learned from this remote learning, and not necessarily just homeschooling, but innovating so the kids don't necessarily have to go into a classroom every day to get the standard stuff. Yeah. What do you think of that?
So I'm congenitally an optimist on these matters. I confess I've been pessimistic in the past few weeks. What John is pointing to and what's happening now, these are traditionally profit opportunities, and entrepreneurs see profit opportunities, and then they earn a profit by improving matters. My only fear, so the fear I was expressing earlier, and I'm happy to let go of it. I wish I could. My only fear is that at some point the government is going to become so powerful, the tax bite is going to become so large, the regulations are going to become so burdensome, that the opportunity to take advantage of these profit opportunities will diminish. And maybe we're not there yet. I'm not predicting that we are. I just think we're a little bit closer to there now than we were 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
You know, the beauty of technology and the beauty of entrepreneurs is they keep outrunning these clowns. I mean, think about it. An app on a supercomputer that sits in our pocket was able to take out taxi cartels around the world. Think about what entrepreneurs continue to do in terms of outrunning these guys. And so it's hard for me not to be optimistic about the future, but there is the unseen aspect to it. How many great businesses died just in the past few weeks that will never be restarted again? Again, if not for John D. Rockefeller, we'd be far less along in terms of healthcare advances. When George Will in his latest book pointed out that in 1941, when he was born, the biggest expense for hospitals was bed linens. That's how primitive healthcare was even then. thanks to wealth creation, we're much farther along. And so eventually we'll cure Alzheimer's and discover some new disease that we never knew about because people will live longer and longer. But what did we miss out on with all this wealth destruction? I'm still optimistic, but wow, think how much better, farther along we would have been if we hadn't listened to politicians and said, you know what, free people don't need a law to not do something that might cause them to be sick or die.
No, I agree. And you've convinced me to be a little bit more optimistic than I was. Although I'm generally optimistic.
You're an optimist.
Keep going, John. We need to.
Yeah, look, what I've learned in studying economics for the past 40 or so years, and I keep learning this increasingly, free markets are incredibly robust. They really are. And this is your point about entrepreneurs outrunning people. Free markets don't have to be perfectly free. I'd like them to be much freer. They would work better if they were freer. But they don't have to be perfectly free. They can take, that old Timex commercial. They can, take a beating and keep on ticking, take a licking and keep on ticking. And markets are like that. You can inflict a lot of damage on them. I don't think you can inflict unlimited amounts of damage on them, which is what I worry about sometimes. But John is right. Markets can take a lot of abuse and still somehow manage to come out better than they were before the abuse was inflicted upon them.
Well, my hope is that people learn this lesson, is that the politicians don't know what's really going on. And that 6 months from now, we're going to be staring at this lockdown, and nobody's going to want to admit that they were for it. It was somebody else that wanted to lock you down. I didn't want to do it. I mean, these costs are going to start coming out, and we're now knowing that the denominator for this virus is a lot bigger.
Yep.
And we've got the number of deaths, so we're now down into like 0.01 or 0.03% fatality rates, which is, unbelievably low compared to what other flu or cold or things like that. Yeah. And so it spreads like wildfire, but it's not that lethal unless you've already got some comorbidity risk.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, if you're an old person, it's very, very dangerous. If you're an ordinary person, not so much.
So coming back to our optimistic theme, if enough people recognize that they got it so wrong, maybe people stop listening and saying, that's a nice rule, but we maybe ought to engage in a little civil disobedience.
I hope so.
Well, the one quibble I would have is that the numbers, as you point out, increasingly show that it's not terribly lethal. But I think it's very dangerous if we, as liberty lovers, go with that argument. We should go with the freedom argument no matter what, because what do scientists and doctors do? The next time this comes along, they'll say, this time is different. And it's actually supposed to hit younger people more, so we need to lock down. If we make the argument numerical, we give them an excuse to lock us down the next time. We've got to say that free people freely moving about produce information that's essential anytime for fighting any kind of virus or disease. Otherwise, they'll always come up with a way to trick easily gulled politicians into wrecking our lives.
I agree with that, but I do think it's important to point out how these numbers have been misrepresented, because that totally shows the opportunism of people with political power. But I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. So 6 months from now, where are we?
You're the optimist. You go first.
6 months from now, we're booming again. The economic numbers, which are always backwards and are not worth our time in the first place, will say something different. But markets aren't stupid. Markets are saying we're going somewhere. And again, thank goodness, no one died, basically. And certainly our best and brightest didn't die. And there's a lot of savings built up, as you point out, in venture capital, private equity, that's going to fund some amazing ideas. Americans are remarkably resilient. This is not the time to bet against them.
Yeah, I don't think we're going anywhere. I've seen a prediction that we're going to be Venezuela, which I just think is absolutely ridiculous. I'm probably 90% where John is on the optimism scale, so which is good.
Yes.
Good. An hour ago, I would have been 80% there, so you brought me up further.
Well, we keep talking.
Who
knows where we'll end up. Well, look, let's wrap up for now. Let's come back and visit on this and some other topics in a few months and see where we are and dig into it then. So John Tamny, Don Boudreaux, thanks for joining the Bill Walton Show. Interesting conversation, and we've all become a little happier than we were 45 minutes ago. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for joining, and we'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Want more? Be sure to subscribe at thebillwaltonshow.com or on iTunes.